We're about to go live, guys. Sound check. Can you guys hear me? You good to go? Welcome to another episode of Above Average Black Men. Yours truly, Chris Bender Sr. I'm flying solo myself tonight, and I got the echo back that I got to get rid of. I see. I'm flying solo myself tonight, and I got the echo back that I got to get rid of. We should be good. You guys can hear me, right? Yeah. All right, man. So, like I said, another episode of Above Average Black Men. Yours truly, Chris Bender Sr. Devin and Chris are not here. Devin's on his way. Chris is in Mexico. They get to travel, man. I get to hold down the fort, man. That's what your sons do when you partner with them, man. But I got some very special guests with me tonight, man. I got my man Joe Higgs, Tommy Franklin. I got Sharif Blackwell, and we got Eldon, who everybody talked about the nugget you dropped last time, man. So I'll make sure I put that out there so they know. Tonight's topic is to me is near and dear to my heart. We're gonna be talking about toxic masculinity. So as I said before, there's a lot of us guys, so we kind of keep our answers short, and then you want to add, just jump in. One of the things I want to talk about, the reason why I brought it up is because, I'm in schools. I work with a lot of high school kids. And I was surprised they know about it. They don't quite understand the impact of that label. So I'm going to start with reading the definition. I don't want to assume. I'm not saying y'all don't know the answer to it, but I want to start with a common definition, man. And we can jump right in it. So everybody's heard about it, right? This is not a new introduction to anybody, is it? All right. Sharif's sitting there like he ready to go to work, man. So I'm ready to go to work, bro. I'm waiting for this. All right. So let me read the definition. Toxic masculinity is a term that has been gaining traction in the past few years. This term refers to the dominant form of masculinity, wherein men use dominance, violence, and control to assert their power and superiority. And before I get into this, I'm going to give you a little backdrop on my research. It's ironic because a lot of females view this as that's how we were raised. That's how we define masculinity, that we laugh at rape, we tell jokes about rape, that we just want to dominate, and basically back in the 50s and the 60s, that we got this caveman attitude and they call it toxic. So here we go. Who wants to jump in first? Everybody's in deep thought. Well, I'll go first. Go ahead, Joe. Well, I mean, you know what? I found it quite interesting when I was doing the research, even at some of the videos. There's some scholars who say this is something people made up, that is not even real. They think it's just, some people got together, females, and they just came up with this term, and it's been taken off. It's getting more and more popular. That it's becoming part of a lot of conversations you hear in politics, and now they're starting to apply to our boys, to our young men in schools. So, like, for instance, part of it is aggressive. And I was talking to a young lady, and I asked, okay, well, how do you tell what's aggressive? What do you mean by aggressive? If they're not hitting you or pushing you, how do you determine if somebody's aggressive? For instance, if I'm having a conversation with my wife, and we're talking, and I raise my voice one iota, she thinks I'm hollering. I'm not hollering. Tommy, you heard me hollering. That's not what I'm doing. But that could be defined as being aggressive. So does that mean I'm toxic masculine?
I think it's a big scope, when we start talking about this. I mean, like you said, some people view is that so lightly that just because I raise my voice, I'm exerting my power, and that makes it toxic, that masculinity, you know. But there are women that raise their voice and, man, I've seen it, you know, or people in general that you know, also exert power or aggressiveness. So you know, when I hear the term toxic, I was like, okay, this can go a whole lot of ways. You know, depends on what your view of what's toxic and what's not toxic. You know, the masculinity, I think, is self-explained, but when you start putting the word toxic in front of it, now people want to know what means toxic masculinity.
But is it, well, not to cut you off, but you know they're saying it's a feminine masculinity too now, so they're covering both sides.
Oh, I searched it a little bit, you know, when I saw the topic. I said, let me just Google it and see what it says, and it has the femininity, toxic femininity right next to it. But it seemed like the aggressiveness that they had for men was a little bit different, in my opinion, for what I've been looking at. I didn't do a lot of research, but I did. When I saw the topic, I said, let me just look at this and then I did an interview with my wife as well, and said, hey, what do you think about it? And you know, she thought, you know, similar to what I thought, that, you know, and then walk around, hey, I'm the man, I am the man, you know, let me be, I'm the boss here, you know, don't stop that.
Well,
That could be toxic in some way.
well, let me ask you a question though. Do you think it's an appropriate term? You disagree? You agree with that? Anybody?
I don't necessarily agree with the term. I do think that as men and as a society overall, I do think there's an opportunity for us to be sensitive, right? And there's an opportunity for us to ensure that we're always doing better than the previous generation, right? And we don't want to perpetuate any of the stereotypes that are really going to keep our women down, right? And I think a lot of times when they think of the traits that are associated with toxic masculinity, it really goes back to as you had mentioned, right? A lot of what was taking place in the 50s and the 60s when the women's movement hadn't really kicked off quite yet, and women were, you know, definitely considered less than. They weren't able to establish themselves in the workforce. You know, oftentimes they weren't able to secure bank accounts and things of that nature. So I think like women are so opposed to going back to those times that anything that reminds them of that, right? They're gonna label it as toxic masculinity. But I don't necessarily agree with the term. I think that there's always an opportunity for us to do better. But personally, I don't think it's relative per se overall. It's just a matter of sensitivity training, if that makes sense.
Sharif looks like he's just really pondering this, man. He's about to get this Aristotle type answer. He's like, you soaking it all up.
I really wanted to say we grew up in a home that was toxic, that they used to watch stepfather whoop my mom's behind. And I used to be like, Mom, why you let this woman put his hands on you? And she said, because I want him to feel like he's the man. And it trickled down to my siblings that they going through the same situation. So I was talking to Joe, and I felt like I didn't fit in because I'm not doing all that. I mean, arguing and fighting and I gotta prove who I am. That's not my character because I've been through it so heavily. It's just it's really hurtful, and it could damage somebody to sit there and witness it. And only time you want to be the man is when. Only time you want to be the man is when. So I mean, I've been there for a long time.
So I think, Elder, do you want to say something?
Yeah, when you look at the term toxic masculinity, it's like most things in society, it can be hijacked. So you take it at its core and you talk about those things like the aggression and those microaggressions and the dominance over women and wanting to put women in their place and feeling like it used to be where you say boys don't cry, you don't show this emotion, in the way that you show your dominance and your superiority is the physical piece that Sharif was talking about, where I have to stake my claim, here's my territory, and this is how I do that. So those are the things that are at the core. But then when you start getting from the academic standpoint or from a media standpoint or from society, you start branching off. And then people start putting their twists and their connotations to it, and it kind of waters down what the actual true issues are. And that's that why are you violent in that way towards women? Why are you leaning towards misogyny? What is that hatred towards women and towards yourself stemming from? What happened to you? And as I've heard before, some people say, who didn't love you? When you were growing up, who hurt you or who did not love
They say hurt people, right? And I think that, that also is definitely a part of it. Some of it, though, I think is also just differences between men and women, right? Whether it's right, whether it's wrong, that's to be debated. I don't know necessarily whether or not you can call certain things toxic, right? Anyone who's putting their hands on their woman, just so I'm clear, like that should never be the case. Neither should the woman be putting her hands on the man, right? But when you start coining terms such as like toxic masculinity or just looking at how, men and women are wired differently, like, I mean, I think that's just the fact that it's real. Like, it is what it is. Men are from Mars, women are from Venus, that type of thing. They say, right, that sometimes men don't have the ability or just aren't willing to share their feelings. And I think that a lot of those just broad assumptions aren't always necessarily true, but oftentimes, like, society really just tries to project a certain narrative, right? And I think that that's also a part of it.
Right.
I agree, Joe. And like for Sharif, he grew up in a household with other men, and they were all growing up in the same, and they all witnessed the same thing. But his choice was, I'm not doing that. His choice was, I'm not doing that. That's not right. Whether that makes me less of a man or more of a man, his choice was that I'm not doing that. Does that make him? He said he didn't feel like he fit in. Does that make him less masculine than his brothers? Not to me and you, but to some people maybe it did. That's the sad part about when you're talking about that makes it toxic that other people would look at him and say, well, because you chose not to beat on women or not to beat on to show your aggression that way, that it made you less of a man. That's the top, in my opinion, that's the toxic part of it. And I don't.
Well, I think.
That part.
Well, and he was. I got everything he said, but I want to go back the other direction because we're starting to go down a whole nother rabbit hole here. I think that was good, but I want to get back because one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about it because Joe said it. Joe said it that what is almost like men are being we're not allowed to be men. I was listening to a young lady, African American young lady, was talking about it, and she said the same thing. She said, "Hey, she's trying to teach her. She's a single mom. I'm trying to teach my son, not to be physically aggressive, but to walk in spaces like he belongs there. To not be intimidated. I'm trying to teach my son to learn to speak up for himself. Defend himself, not in a physical way. Hey, this is who I am. I have rights. I belong here. I fit in." And I was like this contradiction because she feels like, just talking to him, he's being viewed differently. That he's possibly being thrust into this category because he's in a place where it's a whole different culture. because not a bunch of people look like him. So they hear this term and they see it as a negative thing. And it was interesting what Sharif said, because they're not even calculating in what somebody's background may be. They're not factoring in it. This is the way, Sharif is fighting these things or whatever. They just go on because they take this term and they fit us into it. Especially for young black boys. Because they're aggressive. Why they're aggressive? Because they speak up for themselves. Or they're threatening because they got a hood on. Because they got a hoodie on. So now they're threatening, man. I was mediating something between two people, and one of the young men was he's in his, I guess, mid-20s, and the other gentleman was 64 years of age, and the older gentleman was being condescending and kind of talking down to the younger guy. So the young guy was like, "Look, hey man, I don't have to take that anymore. I don't have to stand here and take it." And his first reaction was, he thought dude was going to go get a gun. Wasn't even close to that, but that's how powerful when you plant seeds in people. They take it and run with it, and we got to be careful of labels. So when I hear that, toxic masculinity, and I go look at the definition, and I hear people talk about how that's men in general. Not that it's just one guy they talk to, but they're saying that's men in general. For me, that's alarming. Especially as a guy with two sons, as a guy work with a lot of men, and definitely do a lot of work in schools. It's kind of painting a negative picture. So that's what I want to. Go ahead, Joe.
See, Pastor, I can say this. Me looking at you, you did a hell of a job with your sons.
Okay.
A lot of us men don't know what a father is. So we learn how to be a father by watching and trying to imitate some of y'all. Because not having a father is a hard part. And then when you kind of get with a woman and she has a son, and you trying to teach her son how to be a man, but you wasn't taught how to be a man. So it's kind of hard when you try that. But then she wants you to be this tough dude, and you are, but you're not trying to go too far out the box. Because some women has been abused, and they thinking that's what a man's supposed to do. But you explain to them that's not what a man's supposed to do. Like my fiance, she yells a lot, and I said, "What's wrong with you?" I wanted to call the wedding off so many times, and I had to.
Yo, you do know you do know people watching this, right?
Yes.
Oh, I'm just saying. I just want to make sure.
Let me tell you why. Because when a woman is scarred, she's scarred, and she used to dealing with somebody used to put their hands on her, so they fought a lot. So every time it's like, oh, what are you doing? She in a defense because of what she's been through. And a lot of these women have been through so much abuse, they think every man's supposed to do that, and that's the way they show love. Because from where I was coming from to where I'm in now, that I can tell from my mom, my aunts, my cousins, my sisters, in order for man to show his manlyhood, he got to call you a B. He got to treat you like crap, and you love him. But when you say, "How you doing, sis?" they look at you like you're stupid. But if you say, "Bitch, come here," they want to holler at you. "Oh, he liked me. He liked me." That's not good.
Yeah, I mean, I get the point. Welcome, Jeff.
Hey, what's up?
So we're talking about toxic masculinity, and this question, they're finishing up on the question about do we agree with the term, or basically the origin and where it came from. So I don't know if you want to jump on there. Or you want to wait for my next question?
I'll wait for your next question. I'm sure that the gentlemen have already expounded on everything, so I don't need to say anything.
But real quick, personally, I know I was a little late. Hello to everybody. In my personal opinion, though, I don't really think toxic masculinity is like a real thing, if that makes sense. I do believe people can be toxic. There could be men that are toxic. There could be women that are toxic. But to just throw it on one gender and say if you are confident in yourself, you carry yourself a certain way, that it's toxic to someone else. I think that's just ludicrous and ridiculous, personally. So when I hear that, I just think like, I don't know. I kind of think of the way as I'm looking at the definition right now. One kind of key phrase that stands out to me is social guidelines. I kind of think it's a tool to control or try to hinder young men to fit into a certain box, like my dad said. And I don't think that's right. I don't think it's the case. I think if you are masculine, be in that way. But I just don't think toxic masculinity is a very real thing, in my opinion.
But who wrote that?
So,
Who wrote that?
who wrote the definition?
I'm on Google right now.
No, but okay. And let's look at another definition before we move to my next question. And this kind of fits into what I'm talking about. And I do agree that I don't think it's a real thing. I think when you put those two things together, it to me, I don't see how you fit them nicely. Toxic masculinity is thus defined by adherence of traditional male gender roles that consequently stigmatize and limit the emotions boys and men may comfortably express while elevating other emotions, such as anger. It is marked by economic, political, and social expectations that men seek to achieve dominance. And I say that I think when you say that, it generalizes men, and it's not all men. I know many more. I know a bunch of men who don't fit this category. Tommy and I, we were raised in the same place. We weren't raised to laugh at rape jokes. We weren't raised to think rape was funny. We weren't raised to be involved in domestic violence. We just talked about that. None of those things. So when you throw this topic out there, though, when you start saying men, our society is quickly all gets placed in front of it, or majority. And then when you start placing these labels on young men, young African American men, it's hard for them to get away from it. For instance, I was talking to a Caucasian lady, and I said, okay, well, let me ask you a question. What do you think a police officer hears if somebody like yourself calls him up and says, yo, I got Sharif here in front of me, and he's demonstrating toxic masculinity attributes? What do you think? How do you think he's showing up? He ain't showing up with the peace sign. He already showing up with attitude because that's what he's thinking. And I think when you start talking about police officer, anything we do on race, those labels become extra dangerous. So I think it's really important, though, that we do have these conversations. We talk about it with our sons, like Tommy said, we talk about it with our wives, and we try to stay away from them. I think there's other ways to describe people who may have these characteristics. So my next question would be, and you can think about it before you answer, is how is it why do you think when they come up with labels like this, it almost automatically gets attached to our community? And
we're not a monolith. I say they, non-colored people, if I can say it like that.
I ain't heard colored people, man, since the 60s, but go ahead, bro.
I mean,
unmelody.
There you go. It's almost like, they want to pick a leader out for us and think we're supposed to fall behind this one person. And it's like, hold up. Everybody has different views about things. We all have different thought patterns. We're all not the same. We all don't walk the same. So you can't put us in a box. Just like, the title you're talking about, toxic masculinity. Maybe we can put it like this. The male figure wasn't involved early on in the development of his child. And maybe because he didn't grow up hearing a man's voice in the house, that baritone, that tenor, that bass, all he heard was his mother, he may not know how to adapt to a man figure. I guess, when he gets older or comes into authority, or when he comes in contact with authority figure, like, say, the police. And the police, he'll be like, driver's license and registration. Man, what you talking about, man? Why you yelling at me? It's not even that. It's just the way he's talking, and maybe he never heard that type of, talk before.
But we're going back to people who exhibit those character traits. What I'm trying to get to is it's not the majority of us. That it's probably the minority. It's probably the minority who have that attitude. Like if I would take a poll in this car, I'm pretty sure it'd be 100%. That's not what we do. It's almost like, okay, Jeff, you work on the waterfront. So now people assume that you cursing, you grabbing yourself, because they saw some movie where that's what the dock workers do. So we just gonna put that label on you because that's the expectation. Or we were having a conversation with Joe about some things that happened at work, and it's almost like, okay, you too smart for that. You didn't come up with that. I've had people of different ethnicity say to me, "Oh, you wrote that? That's very intelligent." Like, what you mean by that, bro? Yeah. But that's what happens when we get labels. People hear label and labels attached to somebody, so now it becomes who you are, regardless of if I've ever met you before or not. And so that's why I really want to dig into what that means. Do we think it's appropriate? How we feel about that. And we could talk about, how do we change that narrative? How do we combat that? Because right now it's a lot of females saying it. Now I have an unofficial poll, but if you look at different things, and it just appears to be a lot more females using that term, especially in the political realm. Because we disagree with dude may be a little loud, a little boisterous, and we just automatically assume, that not that he's passionate. See, that's the funny thing about it. In some realms you're passionate, in some realms you're aggressive. It's like if you got money, you get in trouble, you're eccentric. If you're poor, you're crazy. So it's kind of along those same lines. So how do we dive into that? Like, what are your thoughts on the term period? We go back to that question because I don't think we ever really got into it, how you felt about that term.
Yeah, so I disagree with the term overall. I think that it's a narrative that folks are trying to push, right? So to the point of the first question, second question, I think that the reason they try to push the narrative is because they're intimidated, frightened, threatened by what we are, and it's easier to typecast us if they're able to put us in some type of box, right? Also, if you're able to put us in some type of box, and really it kind of predates back to slavery, right, where you kind of dehumanize someone, right, by giving them certain labels, by calling a black man toxic, right, by calling us super predators, right, by referring to us in all of these ways, it makes it easier for them to lock us up and incarcerate us at higher rates than others, right? Like, it doesn't make any sense for us to make up of like less than 5%. We're talking black men of the overall U.S. population, but however, we're over 50% of U.S. population of jails are filled with people that look like us, right? So I think if we can look like us, someone a label, makes it easier to treat us any old way, and I think that's really where a lot makes it easier to treat us any old way.
All right, Derek, who's on the call, says he agreed with you, Joe.
I agree with Joe too as well. I think, like Joe says, it's about people being intimidated, and they try to just put a label to why they're intimidated by you. Something similar to what Devin was saying is that people use it to their advantage when they can use it that way, and it's just put that word toxic in front of masculinity, and then then like Chris, right, your second question is, why is that label headed towards us more than anybody else? And that's because, like jokes, they just seem to be intimidated by us. I mean, back in the day, you used to walk down the street, and approach a white guy and jumped at him. He felt that he thought you was really gonna come to hurt him. That wasn't necessarily the case. So they just try to use that word, I think, just because it just gives them an outlet.
But it has impact. Well, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So I'm going to take a little bit of a different angle. As a father of a son and a father of a daughter, I'm going to take my daughter's spin on this in my answer, and hopefully
won't get kicked off the call by doing that. So my daughter is a young adult, and she told me, hey, when you look at things like the term toxic masculinity, you have to look at the misuse of the terminology, first of all. So that's one thing. As I stated before, people can hijack certain terms. So to Joe's point, you get in and you put a nice little label on it, and then you can easily attach it from a racial standpoint or from a male, female, etc. standpoint, and then from a society standpoint, from a neighborhood, from a zip code to West Oak Lane to wherever you want to put it. You slap that label on it, get enough traction, and people go for it without digging into what the reality of it is.
Mm-hmm.
But when you peel back those layers of that onion, you look at it's about the detrimental treatment of women from a man. So if I'm feeling as a man, in order for my manhood to come out and shine, I have to be overly aggressive to this one, whether physically, mentally, sexually, etc. Then I'm feeling better about myself because now I have that superiority over it. So I don't believe that it's a made up construct. I think that the terminology is hijacked, like a lot of terms and terminology has been hijacked and used. I mean, we don't want to go down this rabbit, but CRT. There's certain things that are buzzwords and terms that are in the news that play out on certain media that we go along with and ride it along because it's popular. You can put it on a bumper sticker, or you make a hashtag, or you can tag it somewhere.
All right. Point well taken. You're not going to be kicked off. I would have hit the mute button, but you were cool.
I think you got to be around us. You got to spend time with us. You can't be, sectioned off. If you're in a mixed neighborhood, everybody gets a chance to know one another. You won't be so afraid of me and my skin color. I'll give you an example. When I used to work for R.J. Reynolds, I was the only man of color in the office. I was an event coordinator. So I had set up the market and everything. So when the job for sales manager came up, I know my rep said, well, Jeff, you're probably going to move up since, you'd be the natural position. No, it wasn't that. It was a white lady, a white woman, she had became my boss. So I'm like, all right, cool, this is how it's going to go. My reps were kind of pissed. I said, no, don't worry about it. We're all going to work together. So in time, we would go to events. Her lack of blending in and trying to relate to the crowd and to the people that she was around, because she was around people of color, you could tell she was uncomfortable. It got to a point where, I pulled her aside and was trying to tell her and said, look, you can't, act like this. And she called me out my name. So I'm like, oh, okay. So what I did was, wrote everything down, and the next morning I presented it to the rest of the team in the office. Everybody in the office they was pissed. They was like, Jeff, what did you do? Did you hit her up? I mean, all these things came about. Like, why would I hit her? No, I ain't gonna hit her. We work together. There's ways of doing things. So when management came in from Chicago, I sat down with them and I told them, I said, something has to be done. I talked with a lawyer, and this ain't gonna work. Next thing you know, they said, look, we have an opening, more territory in Philadelphia. And I was welcome to the change because I wanted to leave Pittsburgh and, I wanted the challenge. Got up here about a month later, my reps and also some of the managers back, the office called me and said, guess what? They got rid of Christy. They fired her. After a month on the job, they found out about it. So you see, how you relate to people.
But that response is what I'm talking about. People respond on labels. And back to Eldo, the reason why I say the term is made up, because if you use the word overly in the definition, then I would agree with you. But they just said aggressive. Jeff was perceived as being aggressive. It was somebody's perception that he was aggressive. So based on that, he could be labeled. because it didn't say overly. And I think aggressive, unless you hit somebody or it's visible, aggressive sometimes can be subjective. That's like saying because I see you with a hood on, I'm afraid of you. You didn't do anything. You didn't say anything. It's subjective. And when I was in college, when I was a freshman, I had a professor in psychology, and she said she did this experiment every day for the first 2 weeks of class. Well, not every day, I had it twice a week for the first couple weeks of class. She kept saying this guy was getting out of jail. He was coming into our class. He was a little unstable. They were putting him in the class as an experiment. Is all we heard. So finally, the day arrived. Dude come into class and bumps into a desk. Everybody scatters. Everybody scatters. Him and the teacher start cracking up. There wasn't anything wrong with the dude. She just planted that seed because she knew if you put something in somebody's head, they believe it. They believe it. That's the problem with labels. And most times people will judge based on what they heard or what they thought. When I do workshop PD days for teachers, and while we're doing one, elevating the voices of students of color. So I asked the question: how many of you have learned about African Americans, on TV or through the media or through what somebody told you? You'd be surprised how many people raise their hand. Yet they're teaching our kids, and they're teaching our kids based off of stereotypes. So when a label like this comes in, it's easy to start labeling people with these labels because I don't really understand, but I think Eldo's aggressive because he walks with a stroll. Tommy's aggressive because he wears his hat sideways. I dress in sweats most of the time. I've had people say, yo, don't you own any suits? I got suits in my closet. He says, I don't need to wear them when I'm gone. So it's just interesting how, labels can really do a lot of damage to us. And that's why I thought my issue with that whole label is the fact that, one, if you put toxic in front of anything, that's always a bad thing. Nothing good comes out when toxic leaves it off. And then when you say masculinity, masculinity can be attributed to any of us, all of us, fall into that category when you look at the definition of masculinity. So that's why I said somebody sat back and got pissed off at their husband or boyfriend or a group of guys and say, yo, we want to get this thing out there. And it's based off an experience, to Jeff's point, because that's what they expect. So they assume that's how he was going to react. So to me, when I hear stuff like that, and especially when I'm dealing with our young boys, because they don't really know the difference. They still in this stage where they think everything is great, man, and I don't care what people say about me stage. And, we know it's not true, but, America is, I got rights. So just trying to enlighten them. And I think that enlightenment has to come from us. I think sometimes we're too silent and stuff. We have great barbershop conversations, but we don't share with our young boys, the magnitude of such a label. I'm sorry, Joe, go ahead. You look like you're ready to go, man.
Yeah, no, my bad, Pastor Chris. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No,
I was going to say, just to follow up, like in addition to the narrative being thrown out there, toxic masculinity, and being used to dehumanize Black men, which allows them to incarcerate us at higher rates and to treat us poorly and to fear for their lives, right? If I'm being honest, when I hear it within the Black community, I more so hear it from like our sisters. Like, I hate to say it, like, oh, that brother toxic, whatever the case may be, right? So I also think that another reason for the narrative or for the label is to divide Black men and Black women, right? Which is, again, something else that they've been doing back since slavery, right? Like, if you think about what was their plan? Their plan was to remove Black men from the home, right? And by removing Black men from the home, leaving the Black community devoid of any leadership, it had a trickle-down effect, right? Even to go on into the 1950s or 1960s, whatever the case may be, where in order for sisters to actually apply for, social services, welfare, whatever the case may be, what was one of the prerequisites? Like, you couldn't have a Black man in the house. You couldn't have a man in the house, right? So I think that in addition to dehumanizing us and using this as a way to incarcerate us, it's also another way to infuse division between the Black community itself. And what's the best way to take somebody down from the inside, right? Now you got us fighting with one another. And if we can't get on the same page as our sisters, right? If they're seeing us as toxic and we're seeing them as toxic in return, right? Because there's false narratives placed on both of us by others that don't even look anything like us, we're never going to be able to come together and get it together and turn this thing around. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, it's two things. I want to shout out Sharif because remember, he started out talking about that. about the absentee dads and the absentee women and learning. So he was on point. So I don't know if y'all shared notes before y'all got on here, but he was. Now I was only kidding, man. I know y'all didn't share notes.
But I can say a lot of it has to do with a lot of us grown up without a father figure. It's hard. And then when you get your child, you want to hold on, you want to be that father, but it's like I wasn't taught how to be a father. So how do I be a father? I have to go back and watch the way some of y'all men move. And sometimes it's hard because a lot of men are not men. And a lot of men don't portray that manly figure, and it's hard because if I was taught all these negative things all my life, all I know is negative. If you was never shown up positive, how can I teach my child positivity? And if I was never loved, how can I give love? Or how can I show love? Because I was damaged my whole life. So me trying to show love the way I know it, you're not used to it. So I got to sit back and allow you to show me or teach me the way you want to be loved. And I have to learn it that way because I was never shown or I was never taught. Now I can show you how to smack a woman upside their head. I can teach you how to do this because that's all I knew and that's all I was taught all my life.
Right. So, and I want to kind of double back on what Joe said because that was my next question. So Joe kind of read my mind. Is why do we as a people we readily adopt labels that's given to us, and then it becomes our truth. That's what we say to each other now. So somebody made this thing up, and we bring it home, and we go ahead. And we did a whole show on that I think talking about what you talked about, how they pit. We so busy fighting each other that we miss the big picture. Voter suppression is going on right now, and we fighting about some other crazy stuff, man. They taking away social programs. They, no more, as far as African Americans getting special treatment. No, I shouldn't say special treatment, but getting certain advantages because they are disadvantaged to get into Ivy League schools. They taking it away. So slowly stuff is starting to be eroded. But this is what we argue about. Whether brothers are toxic or not. And I think again, my fear is that it's become a description of all of us, regardless of what we do, regardless if it's Sharif, if it's Joe, if it's Jeff, if it's Tommy, if it's Daniel, if it's Darnell. Welcome, Darnell. And that's one of the things that kind of worries me because it's yet another, to your point, Jeff, is yet another label that we got to fight against. Because now, and I go back to what I said. I love what Eldo said, overly, because aggressive by itself is kind of hard to define. Unless somebody punches somebody, kicks somebody, are you aggressive, Jeff, because you tell me your opinion? Does that make you aggressive? Now you're toxic? Or are you aggressive, Darnell? Are you aggressive, Darnell, because you don't agree with me? Because I'm in the room and you say, no, I just don't agree with that. Are we aggressive because of what we believe in our faith? We stick by our faith instead of going. So I mean, it's so many things that you could take and throw in that category that could easily get us that label.
You know what, Chris? I think the backdrop in this whole thing is imagery. We have to learn how to control our own images because what's being put out there, I mean, you go back to Birth of a Nation when D.W. Griffith put out that movie with the Ku Klux Klan and you have African Americans in there overly black, eating watermelon. I mean, these images. To this day, I had a friend, this is years ago, I'm not probably 15 years ago, he did a race over in, I think it was South Africa, and he was running. And then he's running through a village, and he sees like a storefront. And it was like, a clothing store. And the title on top of the marquee said bitches and hoes. He was thrown. And then after the race, he doubled back and asked the owner, why would you label something like that? And he said, ain't that what you call each other in America? I see in the movies, and he's like, but this is the imagery that he saw and thought that we accept that. So the power of imagery, we have to control our own. We got to control narrative, the images, and I think when other nationalities, other cultures see that on the big screen or TV, they automatically assume that if they come in contact with a black man or a black woman, this is how they're going to act, and it's not that way.
Well, Darnell, feel free to jump in, but Jeff, we can't control energy because we don't own all the media. So that's the problem with that. We don't, now we cannot buy it. We don't have to, to consume it, but we don't control that. And that's part of the issue because, they make movies, but we go see the movies. I'll give you the perfect example. Homer Simpson is the longest running father on TV. Homer Simpson. You have to go back to a show like Good Times and the Cosbys to find a show when the father wasn't a buffoon, either talking about the kids or acting like an idiot. So even on TV, and guess what? We watch those shows. My wife and kids, everybody thought that was the greatest show in the world, man. And all he did was call his son dumb and make fun of his daughter every episode. And people watch that stuff. So I think we don't control the imagery. Now we don't have to buy it. We don't have to consume it, but we do. It's like Trump, and I didn't want to go there, but you started the segue. Anytime the brother talking about, because this fits into what I'm talking about. It's people in the Republican Party in the news saying, we gonna vote for him because one, we can relate to him because he got a mugshot. Two, because those I don't know who will buy those sneakers. I hope I know it. I hope I don't see anybody know with them sneakers on. But he thinks because he put sneakers out there, blacks going to vote for him. And dude, he calls blacks. He only calls African Americans. He calls us black. But there's a contingent of African Americans who want to vote for him. So we do have to make better decisions. But it goes back to what Joe said. It starts within our community. I think it does. We can't really accept those labels and just start calling. And now y'all brother's toxic. I knew something was wrong with him. Toxic masculinity. Now they finally got a name for it. I just yes.
When you say that, and Joe, this is for everybody. Do you think that happens? That the masculinity part goes back to slavery when the slave master took the biggest man, biggest buck.
Yeah, they tried.
And beat it in front of his family. So coming down history, the man always felt as though, took it out on the woman all the time, i.e., color purple. A lot of black men, when the movie first came out, that was a hot button topic. You remember back then, Alice Walker, but it happened down south, I got some of my own relatives telling me about, that's true.
Yeah. But again, I want to be careful that we don't paint the narrative of all. But to your point and Joe's point, and to Joe's point, the narrative of slavery is still being played out today. Because they used to take the light-skinned Negroes and put them in a house, and they pitted them against the dark-skinned Negroes. And again, we fighting over scraps and dude living his best life. And we all slaves. So I do get that.
I'm sorry, but then when you expand it and go back to what Devin said, you're gonna call me toxic because I have the wherewithal to stand up for myself and speak for myself and know right from wrong and be able to call right and be able to call wrong and do it intellectually, do it. And some people say he speaks so well when he was eloquent when he was. Oh, I'm eloquent when I'm defending myself, but no, you're not eloquent anymore because you stood up for yourself. Now you're toxic. I think that's the piece that we wrestle with, and then sometimes it gets lumped in as black community because how dare you, as a black man, able to stand flat-footed and speak and say these things, and I'm going to interpret it as you're being toxic towards me. You're being aggressive towards me. You're doing those things, and all I have to use is the buzzwords like the woman did for the man in New York to that park when he was bird watching. I picked the phone up, I called 911, and I could use key terms and phrases And to your point, Pastor Chris, I know exactly what's going to happen when the Popo comes. He's not going to come with bells and whistles. He's going to come guns blazing for the waterfalls.
I won't give Donnell a chance to speak because he came off mute and he's been waiting patiently. So.
Good evening, brothers. I'm sorry that I'm late. I was just hearing some of the conversation. And, I was listening to what Brother Sharif was saying about father and didn't know how to be a father. My father wasn't a part of my life. And I struggle with it. You know what I mean? I struggle with it. Until my wife said to me one day, you have to break the curse. You have to break the curse. You cannot continue on doing the curse what your father has done to you and your family. You just cannot do it. And it took me a long time, long story short, it took me a long time to understand what she was saying, because she said to me one day, you're going to have a family and you can't do what your fathers did to you and walk out of your life. So you can't do it. And if one was to ask me today about my father, they would never know that my father wasn't part of my life. And I say that to say, when I sat still with God, and many years it took me to sit still with God, and God says, wait a minute, I've always been your heavenly father. And what I need you to do is sit back, and you have to do what you have to do best for your kids. You got to be a father for them. Long story short, I did get to know who my father was. My father said to me before he was dying, he said, listen, I wish I have never done everything that I've done to your mother to not be a part of you and your little sister's life. And my father said to me, he said, listen, you have to carry the torch. Don't do your family that way. So I say that to say, sometimes we have to break the generation curse of when we're dealing with situations in our lives. If we don't break the generation curse, we'll still be stuck right there. We have to put effort into it. I know for me, I had to put effort into God. I couldn't tell God and say to the Holy Spirit, I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it. And then before you know, it's gone away. So, that was what I had to say about that. To God be the glory that he helped me to understand what it meant and how it meant to be a father.
I mean, I agree, because one of the things I do is I run fatherhood classes. I do. So I hear this conversation all the time when I'm talking to guys who haven't had a dad. So Sharif, and I get what Sharif was saying. The light bulb comes on differently for everybody. And, that is important because our environment does matter. And everybody's not strong enough, they should be, to break their environment. But it comes back to this whole full cycle, what we're talking about, toxic masculinity, because what I'm hearing is that we're talking about that it's real because some of us do exhibit it. That's what we're saying, right? That's what I'm hearing, right?
Yeah.
All right, so
I think you're hearing that from some, but I mean, like you said, if we're going to take a poll here and anywhere, I don't think any individual believes that they are toxic masculine.
But it doesn't mean they're not, though. It doesn't mean they're not, though, just because they don't believe it.
I don't think anybody believes that that's the behavior that they're exerting. But like Sharif and Darnell is saying that some of that does exist, So
well,
I don't believe that. I'm like that. I don't believe that the term should carry weight. And I think, Chris, what you're trying to say is it's up to us and people like us to get the message across. Hey, let's not use that term because that's not who we are. That's not who we are. Even if you eliminate the race factor, but let's just say as a man, that's not who we are as a man. But then the main thing is that we don't let it carry over to who it seems to be aimed to. It seems to be aimed to knocking us down.
I mean, I don't agree with the term, but I do agree with, like Eldo said, there's some of us who fall into the category of some of those attributes of being overly aggressive, of grabbing and doing the things that, as Sharif described, that's not applicable. Again, my concern is that it's becoming a wide paintbrush. It's painting like all men or the majority of men fall into that category. There's, to me, if I look at everybody I know, that I know, I don't know anybody like that. If I did, they wouldn't be my friend anymore. But I'm just saying, that's not the circle I'm running. But I don't. So when you paint that picture, though, somebody's looking at that saying, hey, these brothers, toxic masculinity is a thing. Not really looking at the definition. Looking at what they hear and putting those two things together. And it goes back to what I said. Darnell may do something that's not aggressive, but if I perceive as aggressive, Does that mean he's exhibiting toxic masculinity? And there's a lot of people, man, who have different characteristics that are unlike ours, but it doesn't mean they're aggressive. It's how they communicate differently. I know people who naturally talk loud. I think we all know people like that. When they talk, it's loud. So and they're not aggressive. It's just how they communicate. I talk with my hands. So if I'm in a situation where, and I've been here before with people in domestic violence, I got to be careful. I'm not moving my hands around a lot. Because they flinching. I've done workshops with them. To me, that's not aggressive. To them, that's being aggressive. So that's the part where I think that concerns me. And then even more when it becomes a label that we start to throw, because like I said before, it really starts to point towards, it might start out all, but then in our community becomes a big thing, like Joe said. And we saying it to each other. Next thing you know, you got teachers writing down, Joe, he exhibits the characteristics of toxic masculinity. He write this down in second grade, so that follows him all the way through the 12th grade.
I think there's a lot that plays a part that some people they love that. It's like I'm looking at my sisters and I say to them, y'all beautiful. And you got these lanes as a band, it's like he gotta be the man. Like he walking with his pants hanging down his behind, he's the man. That's my man. That's my man. But then when your son do it, you want to whoop his behind, and it's like, well, he wants to feel like he's the man. So he's being masculine because he can do this, he can do that. In their eyes, they enjoy that word because they like that word. It's because of their lifestyle. See, when you live in that lifestyle, it's okay because that label fits you. But if you're not living that lifestyle and that's not what you're into, it doesn't fit you.
So let me go to my last question then. What's your definition of manhood?
Well, I feel that in today's world, we have to be honest with it. Young men are not what we were trained to be. I just cut it straight to the cloth. And it starts within the home, you know what I mean? And so many homes that the fathers are not are participating in the home. And what manhood is all about. Sometimes we have to challenge ourselves and say, what is my brother's keeper? What is my brother's keeper? Sometimes we have to challenge ourselves with that. Who is our brother's keeper? So I feel like, for manhood, I can say that I take some blame of it. I can only speak for myself of seeing some of these young brothers and cats that's growing up. And I want to say something to them, like, yo, man, do you know you're not supposed to walk on the inside of the curb? You're supposed to walk on the outside of the curb. I was talking to my niece one day. She didn't know that the man was supposed to open up the door for her, for the seat, blah, blah, blah. They didn't know that. So, that's I can see that's some of the manhood that is lacking in these kids today.
All right, good answer.
Darnell, I'm glad you brought that up about walking on the outside when you're with a woman, because coming home going back to the car one Sunday after church, my wife and I were walking. I was on the outside. This man had stopped in the middle of Pickering Street and rolled his window down. Hey, brother, I'm glad to see that your wife got a good man because you are walking on the right side of the street. This man didn't know me from Adam. And I'm like, all right, bro, appreciate it. No, I want you to know I'm feeling that. And I'm like, I turned and looked at my wife. I'm like, yeah. I'm gonna get that statement. That's manhood.
Yeah.
What'd you say? You want that to be a Kodak moment, huh? Yo, get this on film.
Yeah, I wasn't doing anything other than what I was taught by my elders. And whether it was my father, my grandfather, uncles, or whoever, that's what I was taught, and it stuck with me. And the reason it stuck is because it made sense. If I'm going to be a protector, not that she can't hold her own or do things on her own in an independent woman, but if I'm going to be a protector, sometimes that means even something as simple as being on here, whether the car comes up and splashes water, except whatever the case may be, that's just a form of I'm covering you. Not to say that you cannot do on your own, because if I wasn't there walking with her, you're gonna be walking down that sidewalk by yourself.
Right.
We even go a step further than that. You think about car doors. You know, I wish my son wouldn't let their mother get in the car and they not open up the car door for them. That's like one of the biggest pet peeves of mine. You know, sometimes I have to tell my wife, no, slow it down. Stop this car door, not unless we're in a fight. But these are some of the things that for me to sum it up, I baffle with some of it. It just struggles my mind. Like I came in somebody's house one time and the boy had his hat on the table. And it wasn't even my hat, my house. I said, yo, man, who hat is that? He said, I said, dude, don't you ever put a hat on somebody's table. As long as I got breath and I walk in the door, don't you ever. I don't even put a hat on my bed. So let alone you're going to put it on the table. But nah, bro, you don't do that. This is somebody's house.
He real old school. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, I like that. So,
like I said,
so as we close, what's your definition of a man? Go ahead, far away.
My definition of it. Go ahead, Sharif.
No, my definition is different from y'all. Because, like, me watching y'all, how to be fathers, taught me how to be a father. I didn't understand what a man's role was supposed to be because I was never shown that. And if you never shown it, you don't know. So as I grew, understood, and I ran from it because I didn't realize what was in front of me. I've been through a lot. So me looking at a manhood is watching some of y'all brothers, like the relationship that you got, with your son next to you. That's awesome. I wish I had that with my dad. I don't. I know my dad. I talk to him on the phone every now and then, but we don't have that connection. We brought up in fosterhood, no difference. You know, and I gave my foster parents hell because I thought if I get in trouble, my dad would come get me. I'm his only son. But he never did. So I was hurt. And everybody came my way, I hurt them because the damage I was shown. So honestly, I don't know.
That's a great answer, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, man. I feel that. I mean, my opinion, manhood is, loving God, being a protector, showing empathy. Like with my sons, I've been raising them since they've been 1 and 3. My one oldest he's 34 today. Today's his birthday. My youngest is 31. Growing up, I taught them. I said, hey, it's all right to cry. It's all right to say I love you. Here, give me a hug. I taught that to them, as they were coming up. I talked to them, like I try to raise a critical thinker. Talk to them, a lot of times when I'm getting mad, I'm ready to really rail on. I try to talk to them. I'll put a little hand on the butt, but nothing like how I switch and belt, nothing like that. But I talk with them, that's generational. But a lot of there's no guidebook to parenting. There's a lot of nights I got on my knees, prayed. Young men that grew up, there's a lot of things that happen. You really gotta be in their life. I was there a lot of times and just trying to mold them. I'm glad that they're not shot, they're not in jail, they're doing good. I praise God for that. Hey.
All right, who's next?
I think manhood is something that evolves, right? So before I get into like the biblical piece, I'll say this. I think that for instance, right now, Pastor Chris, you sit next to your son, right? He's a young adult. Your role as his father is not the same as it was when he was 3, when he was 5, whatever it is, right? You're more like his consigliere now. You give him counsel, you give him advice, but you have already trained him up in the way that he should go, right? Which also is one of your responsibilities as a man, to make sure that you embed that into your children and to make sure that they know the word, right? But you also need not provoke them to anger. You also need to love on your wives as Christ loved the church. You also need to cultivate or to work, right? As God had commanded Adam in the garden. So as a man of faith, I think that there are a lot of principles, right, that we're supposed to live by and pull from the Bible in regards to what it means to be a man. Loving thy neighbor as thyself, showing compassion, all of these things. And I think that, Jesus gave us an example of what to be. And it's crazy, right? As articulate and as irrational as he was for his time, they probably call him toxic today, right?
That's a good point.
Right? So I think overall, that's what it is. But I think, manhood never changes. It's not stagnant, right? At one point, Pastor Chris, right, you're going to become a grandfather, right? If not already. And then that changes also. There you go. So there's always levels to manhood. There's levels to this. So I think it's something that is always evolving, but the general principles are there and they're given to us within the Bible. But that's basically what it is to me.
Right.
Yeah, just Joe, I agree with you 100%. That's basically what I'm going to say. Repeat it. I'll change the words a little bit. To me, manhood is you mature into an adult and you take responsibility and accountability as you grow as a person and you try to get yourself better and the people that you're responsible for, whether it's your children, your grandchildren, your community, or whoever you're responsible for, that you take ownership of being a responsible person. To me, that's what manhood is. That I've matured and I've learned, and I'm learning every day. I'm learning from those children and grandchildren, and also I'm teaching them that to do the right from home. So that's manhood is to me. Is that, and I'm a father. I have 3 kids, 2 boys that's 34 and a daughter that's 35 and 3 grandkids. And like Chris said, we grew up in the same neighborhood and almost in the same house all the time. From time to time, so we learn from one another. Somewhat like even I know Sharif's story seems to be the little child, born up in foster care, but he made good choices in my opinion, from what I can see. Said that I'm not gonna be that. That's not what I'm gonna be. I'm gonna be better than that in so many ways. So that's manhood to me. That you try to get better, right, Jeff?
There you go.
That's Tommy, you hit the nail on the head because that, to me, what Sharif was saying is the ultimate exhibit of manhood. By saying, I understand and know where I came from. I understand and know the environment I was in. I understand as a child. And I'm looking to you, men, in your examples that you're setting, and I'm pulling those good attributes and those good things so that I could try to take those steps forward. You can't get it. I mean, that's no more of a man to me than any definition because you're no longer doing as a child and childish things. You're saying, I've learned from that. I've matured from that. And now with this wisdom and responsibility, and like you said, Tommy, this accountability, I'm going to move forward, do for the community, do for my family, do for others.
Well put. I'll say something. Yeah, I'm going to say something that I'll let my son figure out. I think manhood is a bunch of things. You guys hit on the head. I think one thing that we don't talk a lot about, I think manhood is also about being a visionary. I think to be successful, whether it's a father, whether it's a man or whatever, we got to always be thinking ahead. I think manhood is not just about living in a moment, because when you live in a moment, you make choices that happen in a moment. I think a part of manhood is being able to say, okay, some things I got to start thinking about what's next. Sharif, I agree with everything they said. You are right there, bro. How am I going to break the cycle? I may not have the answer, but I'm chasing it. I'm going to find it. You're not sitting there saying, well, I'm living my life one day at a time, man. Whatever happens, it just kind of happens. I think we fall into that trait. I think another quality of a successful man is the ability to forgive. I think sometimes we get so stuck, man, in our personal feelings that our emotions get in the way. And if we look at it from a spiritual aspect, I shared this a couple of weeks with the guys. I think if you never experience the love of God, it's hard to love anybody because you don't really have a firm definition of love. We love peanut butter, we love cars, we love a bunch of stuff. Is that love you have when you get into the love of God? And part of that comes with your ability to forgive, because when you forgive, you're kind of like at that. To me, that's one of the most vulnerable parts for me when I have to forgive somebody. And Tommy and I, we talked about this the other day, because now I got to break down and really look at myself. You know, I think another attribute of manhood is your ability to be a servant leader. I think your ability to recognize, man, that it's times when you should be serving your wife, man. It's all about what your wife do for you. It's times when you should be serving your brother. You know, I think another thing about manhood is I think is brotherhood. And that's one thing I love about our Monday calls, man. The thing we had in Delaware, though, 11 folks showed up. They still talking about that. So I think manhood is brotherhood, because real men surround themselves with real men. I'm not afraid to call Joe, say, Joe, I'm struggling right now. So, I'm not afraid to say, yo, Tommy, you're my brother, I love you. I think those are key attributes. I think another thing about manhood, and I'll stop here, is our ability to adapt. I think, too many men who I work with, they get crushed because they can't adapt. I think real men learn how to adapt. It doesn't mean you're weak. It doesn't mean you're compromising. You learn to adapt. I can adapt without compromising my values. I was telling this story, talking to somebody the other day, when I used to coach, and my son will tell you this, I used to scream a lot. Not scream at them, but holler instructions to them. And I don't remember, I think one of the next to the last years I coached you, this kid started crying on the court. Now everybody like, yo, what you do? And I'm like, what did I do? But I had to change my style, because I realized that now we got a sensitive generation who I can't. And I think men understand that. And Joe talked about it, I can't parent him like he's 3 years old anymore. He's 30, he's grown. My grandson is 5. I'm learning things to do with him that I didn't know to do with my kids. Not that I was wrong, but you learn, as you move on. So I think, we got to be able to do those things, man. We got to stop being stuck. And I do want to add one more thing. I think real men don't allow themselves to be defined by their situations or circumstances. We understand that's not the mistake I made is not who I am. It may be a bonehead mistake, but too many of us, we carry this millstone around our neck of something that we did in the past that we just can't let go of. I heard this pastor say one time, he said he was talking to one of his somebody in his congregation, and they were meeting for like 2 years, and dude just wouldn't change. So finally dude said, well, man, you gotta understand, man, my father did this to me when I was 8 years old. He says, well, how old are you? He says, I'm 58. He said, dude, you've been carrying around for 50 years, man. He said, yo, you need to get over it. And I'm laughing because I don't know if I would ever say that to somebody, but he was right. And that's why I applaud Sharif, because Sharif is moving on. He's trying to find he's not sitting there saying, oh, woe is me. So I think those are quality attributes that what a man is. And I think this goes back to how we can redefine or get rid of that whole toxic masculinity, because it's not for all of us. It's a select few who fall into that category.
Yeah, everyone kind of hit the head with the whole manhood thing. I do think of accountability, respect. I think about taking care of business and dedication as well too. Definitely the adaptable part, that was a piece I really didn't think about at first, but that definitely makes sense to me as well. But as far as just, while we wrap everything up, as far as, toxic masculinity in general, I just think we have to do a better job of not throwing that toxic word to each other. Toxic women, toxic men. We kind of do a great job in America. Not a great job, but we do a job. We kind of set the culture or the pop culture trends. And once one person picks up the hot trend, it kind of spreads like wildfire. And I feel like that's where we got to the point with this whole toxic masculinity thing it was someone heard the hot phrase and then just ran with it to where it kind of spread like wildfire to pretty much all men at this point. So I just think we have to do a better job of not throwing those terms, especially when you know people who aren't toxic in your own life.
Well, I want to read something. We got a lot of responses on Facebook, but my man Daryl Mance, who's in the warmer climate now. He got relocated, but he said something that kind of sticks out, man. He says American society redefined has created a new mental construction that projects manhood as an aggressive, irresponsible mentality that automatically repels him in the image of a man because of his subjectivity to what he sees and mimics. And I think that kind of summarizes everything we just got finished talking about, man. I think he hit it on the head, man. There's a couple other people that provided some things. Gary Bryant said, unfortunately, we participate in negative images. We accept and play the characters and write the songs. We have to stop selling out the images and toxic music. So that feeds on what you were saying, Jeff. We had, as my oldest son would say, he would politely tell me that we over time. He would definitely tell me that, man. So as we close out, man, you guys want to share some final thoughts?
I just want to say, I appreciate these kind of things. This only enhanced me as a father, as a husband, and as a man. It only enhanced me to be stronger in my faith and walk with God, but more so my faith and walk within myself.
Integrity is another key component, I think, for men as well.
Anybody else?
I just want to thank everyone for allowing me to take the opportunity to share some of the things about me. But I'm learning every day. And like I told my dad, I love you. And I want us to continue to have a relationship, even though you wasn't ever in my life. But I want you to start now. And it's never too late. And that's what I'm trying to do right now.
I appreciate you, man.
And I would love to continue to build with your brothers.
You part of the family now, man. That Monday night thing.
Don't say that, man. Don't say that, man. You knew me all along.
I think Joe will tell you, man. We welcome Joe from day one, man. And everybody that's a part of, especially that Monday night thing, man. I think it's like 30 of us or something like that. We all family, bro. I spoke in Delaware Saturday, and a lot of them showed up, and I know they had to rearrange their schedule, man. And people like Joe who couldn't make it text me that morning. No, I'm being honest. Who texted me? They didn't have to. They got up early to text me. They got up early to text me, say, "Yo, bro, I'm praying with you." That's brotherhood. Some people would be like, "Well, I can't make it, so what? You on his own." So I really appreciated that.
My dad taught me one thing, and he wasn't in my life. I'm my mother's son.
Yeah.
He involved me in a lot of activities. My father taught me not to be like him. I was always mad, where was he at and everything else, but you know what? I went back, to his gravesite. There's no headstone there, so that speaks volumes. So I spoke to him, and I told him I forgive you. Like Pastor Chris said, I threw it in the pit. Okay, the future. And you're right now, you're doing straight New York on Black Man. And what you're doing right now is excelling.
Amen.
Every day we grow, we learn.
Mm-hmm.
Every ear is open, And I'm like, hey, I'm learning every day. I love everybody on this call.
Anybody else? Closing thoughts before we go? Well, I'm going to say this, man. My dad always said this, and we say this in our private week, man. As men, we have two choices. Either we rise to the occasion, or we shrink to our circumstances, man. And I applaud you guys for rising to the occasion, man. Well, average black men, Chris Pender Sr.
Devin Pender. Remember, guys, we are here to empower, inspire, and uplift the community. And the like, follow, subscribe, share, comment. If you want to see some different topics, you guys want to join in again, this was definitely awesome, So definitely spread the love, spread the word.
You guys are welcome every Wednesday if you want, man. We're here 7:30 to 8:30. And to Chris, I know you're in Mexico watching, man. Sorry you missed a great show, bro. All right, man. I see you guys Monday night, man. Peace. Thank you so much. All right. She already ate, man. I let her out. She pooped.